Hello and welcome to this video on the Opalina from Hieroglyphic. It's a stereo free-band filter network, isolator and or resonator. Here's what's to come in the video. This video is sponsored by Hieroglyphic. So following on from the release of Plume, videos on that one down below, here we have Opalina, which is listed as a filter network. It's 14 HP and comes with, in the same box, a 2 HP expander called the OpX or OPX. Before we get into the features, just quickly, this is a free patches series video where we distill down a demo video to just 3 ideas rather than going all out and fully in depth as we usually do. However, there's a bonus patch here and some exclusive extras for Patreon supporters, and I've taken the time to explore these with a range of different sound sources. So going over the features in the panel, this takes a stereo input with the left input normaling to the right if that's unpatched, and this then passes into 3 different filters, and you have the level of each filter here and a CV that adds to that manual level control. And with the mode button here, you can change from this acting as a resonator, which is 3 bandpass filters, to this being an isolator, which is a multi-mode filter style network where the low is a low pass, mid is a bandpass, and high is a high pass. We have a global frequency control, and sweeping that cutoff controls all the filters at once. This is modulated via the FM input, and the slider above is an attenuator to control the depth or inverted depth of modulation from your external FM. With that all the way up full, it does track volt per octave as well. We then have a span control and a CV input that adds to the manual span control, and in resonator mode this changes the kind of span of those frequencies between the 3 band passes, and in the isolator mode, span there controls the bandwidth of that mid band pass filter. You get manual resonance control and again a CV input that adds to that. And then we come down to our outputs here. We have a sum output, which is a sum of all of the filtering here. These are all stereo outputs. And then we have individual stereo outs for the high, mid and low bands. Going on to the 2 HP expander here, place it above, below, whichever side of the module you like. This provides additional inputs. And these inputs go directly to the different filter bands. These work in parallel to the main input, so you can mix using both of them together, allowing you to input a stereo signal just to the high filter, just to the mid, or just to the low, alongside that main input. The patches for this video are on screen now, and there's lots of extra kind of points of interest noted alongside these timing markers in the video description. We'll explore how the module sounds and build up a kind of oscillator shaping patch. We'll look at spectral mixing, getting creative with how we merge and sweep through 3 different effects modules, and then we'll get into multiband modular processing, plus there's a quick bonus filter ping patch that kind of went all hypnotic techno on me. Head down below for that timing index, skip through as you like, and without further ado, let's dive in. So in this first patch of Opalina, let's just take a look at the sound and build up here with the resonator towards this kind of oscillator shaper patch. Mixing in different sounds to different parts of the spectrum on the expander, and taking effects from different outputs from specific frequency bands. So here we are in resonator mode with our low, high and mid bands. We can change the span of those frequencies so they're more distinct. And of course 3 band passes. It's a nice thing to have access to. Some resonance, maybe a bit more span. just go to isolator mode. This will now be a low pass for the low, a band pass for the mid, with bandwidth control on the span. And you can hear we are getting a little bit of clipping, with the build-up of resonance between the bands and the levels. You might just need to back things off occasionally. And in isolator mode, we have a high pass. So it's a high pass, a low pass, and a mid band. But let's stick to Resonator. And let's start building up a patch. I'll start by animating the frequency. And I have here a nice sequence. And it's the span here that's controlling that distance between these three different bandpass resonator peaks. So I'll add in a bit of envelope here. It's just giving a nice kind of enveloped effect, spanning those bands out. We could make that a bit heavier, a bit more modulation. Bring in the sequence again. And listening to the bands, that's the low, mid, and high. And at this point, let's mix in a bit of noise, but rather than doing that through the actual input itself, I'm going to use the expander and just mix in some noise just to that high band. So you can hear it's not present on the low and mid. It's just in that high band. It's a really nice way to blend signals. We'll do more of that kind of spectral mixing in another patch. Let's get these animating in level here. I'll use some stepped random to the mid band. And it's actually this mid band I want to take out to feed my effects. So if I patch from the mid output, and even just mute this or unplug it, we're just feeding that mid band to my reverb, which keeps that reverb nice and clean, where the lower and higher bands can play. We could swap that to say be the high band to the reverb. So low and mid don't feed the verb, and the high does. But with that noise in the high band, I think I prefer the mids. And one nice trick here if you're working in mono, because there's no feature to go from mono to stereo, there's no kind of stereoization of a mono signal. We could take an output, and this is why I have it in the split cable here, and actually patch it back into the right side. So any resonance you have will be doubled. Any changes in frequency in those bands, they're going to start patching kind of into themselves. It's not quite a feedback loop, but you're going to go through one set of filters, make them steeper and more resonant, going back into them again. So left output to right side. And here's just that right output. If I just monitor that directly, you can hear compared to the left, that's just the left out. Now the left into the right, I'm listening to the right. Quite a bit more resonant. And you could then animate that differently, say in a low pass gate here. But back to the main out. I'll leave the reverb muted for now, and let's get a vault proctive sequence going here to my oscillator, to the saw wave that's feeding Opalina. And this is working really well, but what works even better is to get this pitch tracking. So if I mix in to this FM signal just off screen here, the vault proctive that is also going to my oscillator, we're going to have relative wave shaping, if you like, that follows those pitch changes. I might just tune down a bit here. Let's remove that noise for a moment. And hear what that sounds on the output from the right, just doubling up that resonance and frequency. Oh, really kind of juicy. And I'm just turning up a low pass gate here with that right side in it, and then letting it be struck. It's just so full of character. Back to the main out. Reverb fed from the mid signal. That's dancing around in level a bit as we're modulating it. Mid out reverb and the main. I'll put the noise back in. So that's the sound of Opalina building up a patch and playing around with its features. Now we've already done the free patches for this free patches series video and done some bonus bits, but I couldn't help but ping this, and outside of the kick drum and the effects, this is pinging the module. And it sounds really nice, splitting out those bands and adding effects. Some vault proctive sequencing, level sequencing, and bringing a kick drum back in. Some really nice low end. And those top end percussion bits just work really well. I'm going to break down this patch over on Patreon as a bit of a bonus patch. Head to patreon.com/DivKid if you'd like access to this exclusive video and many others. But just know that pinging the module sounds really good. So for this second patch, I've got a really fun spectral mixing example here, using the expander to mix together, spectrally, like multiband mixing, 3 different effects. If I play you my dry sound, this is Plume. And if I mute the dry and we just listen to the stereo output here, fully wet. And pushing around per note the span of the bandpass, that middle frequency point in the isolator mode here, frequency modulating between these bands, and adding some audio rate modulation and crunch, which is all really fun. Let me pull the patch back and I'll walk through it. So here's that dry sound again. It's the only thing playing in the mixer. Its output here is split in a mult, and that mults out to a stereo reverb. Here it is fully wet, split with these split cables just into the mixer so you can hear it. That's what's coming in to the high stereo input on the expander. It's split into this crush delay, a noisy characterful PT delay from Bafako there. Again, split into the mixer so you can just hear the output, fully wet, and that's the mono mid input on the expander. And then for the low stereo input, I've got this really short kind of diffused room that is the effects aid. And if I just unmute the module here as it is, here's that low effects aid. You can hear the frequency here is a low pass control. In the mids, is the frequency of this band over our mid input crush delay, but we also have that span for a thinner band or a more broad band, wide bandwidth bandpass filter. And then the high is the cutoff frequency of a high pass for the high input, which is Isu's trifecta there, that big reverb. So we can use this to just create a static kind of multi-band spectral mix of these effects. So first placing that delay, adding above it our long reverb, and below it. So we're too low there to really hear this. Let's come up. That's that low pass blend of the short diffused effects aid, delay on top, and some high reverb. So we there have a unique kind of spectral mix. Spectral mixing because we're mixing across these different frequency spectrums. And just that against the dry sound in the mix is a nice, unique, blended effect space to work with. But this gets really fun when we start kind of ragging it around. For every note that plays, I have a stepped random signal. Let's play around with the frequency of this yellow trace and cable. And you can hear really drastic shifts in which of these different low, mid or high band inputs is kind of taking up more space in that frequency spectrum. I have another stepped random here. It's more attenuated before I come in to play with the span of that mid band. And hopefully you can hear some subtle changes in how wide that band is there. Together, really interesting, dynamic, rhythmically shifting effect space. And again, this is just stereo fully wet in the mix out of that sum. And finally, I was playing around with audio rate modulation, because why not? Let's try it on, say, that high band. This is attenuated before it's coming in. And what's really nice with audio rate modulation here is you can really dial in where it sits. If, for example, you wanted largely odd delay, and let's just say a real top-end bit of crunchy audio rate, you can really dial in where that's sitting, placing that frequency much higher. Or making that lower, lay more of that high input, the long reverb, occupy more frequency space, we're hearing more audio rate modulation then. Let's take this audio rate modulation a bit higher. And I bet this would work really well on a different range of sources. So I'll leave all the patching the same and I'll just replace Plume here as an input sound source before we move on to the third patch. So here's that same patch, but this time with drums, the Modulab Trinity is a sound source. I won't run down everything in as much detail, but just quickly, dry drum sound. What is my low input? This diffused drum from the effects aid. Mid input, the PT delay, crush delay. And the longer reverb is the high input. Here's the sum output. No modulation. And one nice thing here where we just listen to this on its own, fully wet as it were, the main inputs still work. They blend with the expander. So I could mix in here, say some noise, and really emphasize any movement that's happening. I have my noise in an external VCA, so turning this up, And you could blend in synths, other drum sounds. Just be kind of wary of the level as you stack all these expander inputs and the main one. Frequency modulating again, span modulating that mid-band with these stepped signals, just like before. Audio rate modulation of the highs. Blending in some noise. And I bring the dry drum sound back in. And just for good measure, here's a third example of that same spectral mixing patch, patch 2 of 3 in the video here, using rings. Here's the dry ring sound, the same sequence that was sequencing Plume, the effects quickly, big reverb to the high in, delay to the mid in, short diffused room to the low in, and here it is, out of the sum output. Audio rate modulation of the high band, stepped modulation of the frequency and the span. The only difference here is I've slowed this delay down again like it was for Plume. It was sped up for the drum example. And I've made the oscillator that's audio rate modulating the high band volt per octave track. So that kind of aliased top end tone. There it is as it was, just static. But actually getting that tracking the pitch of our input, which is rings. We have some pitch independent crunchy aliasing in the high frequencies. And just one kind of twist of that frequency knob, and we're in a whole different kind of effect space. Still modulating, but without, let's leave the audio rate modulation in the high. So in this third patch, instead of spectral mixing like the last patch, we're actually breaking apart a stereo mix instead. I have a stereo mix here at the main input, and then I'm breaking this into highs, which I'm processing one way, mids being processed another, and lows being distorted, compressed, and crushed. And they go back as stereo channels in the mix. So sweeping that frequency, we can really drastically change the whole thing. Now let's first just listen to the actual sum output here. This is just my stereo mix now coming in. Let's remove this for now. And the sum out. We're in isolator mode, where we have the low, the mids, and the highs. And I'm just setting a pretty even balance, just a bit below full. And you can hear we get that nice kind of notching, phasing like sound from the isolator as is. But if I patch these back where they were going, which is out of the different frequency outputs here, the highs are coming through the effects aid for some reverb, just so I can wash out that top end, muting that. The mids are coming into a VCA, and that VCA, if I close it down, I can use probability and some envelopes to chop into the sound. Can be quite playful with the mids there. And then the lows, they're coming out in Tweezer's trifecta for compression, distortion, bit crushing and some noise. So as I bring all of them back into the mix, these outs get processed, and then, as I say, they are their own stereo inputs there on the mixer. And we can still do some spectral mixing here. If I bring in this cable to the high input on the expander, through an attenuator I have my hi-hat through some delay here. So again, changing the frequency. Really changes whether I hear that or I don't. So that's breaking apart a mix into 3 different multibands here in stereo, processing them and having some fun. This is a really heavy-handed example of this. It works really well with Foley recordings, chords, more say ambient-led synth sounds. But I thought just a nice kind of repetitive techno loop with drums and some bass would be a nice, quite heavy-handed, but nice obvious example of being able to break a sound apart into different spectrums, different frequency bands, and then process them creatively. If you've got this far in the video, drop a spectral sync in the comments. What would you like to use Opalina with? Let us know. Head to patreon.com/DivKid for the bonus extra video on the module, where you'll gain access to other exclusives and the DivKid Discord community too. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye!